Welcome to our webinar discussion today on AI education and the futures we choose. My name is Lillian Pace. I'm the Vice President of Policy and Strategic Foresight at KnowledgeWorks, and I have the privilege of being your moderator today. This is going to be a really exciting conversation. We are going to benefit from the research of two incredible individuals who have looked at the issue of AI and education through complementary but different perspectives. We have joining us today Catherine Prince, who is our Vice President of Strategic Foresight and Strategy at KnowledgeWorks, who is going to share our brand new forecast on the future of education, looking at how we might chart a new course for education. Her particular perspective is going to look at artificial intelligence and the implications 10 years out. So she's going to really take us into the future. And we are also joined by Rebecca Winthrop, who is the Senior Fellow and Director of the Brookings Institution Center for Universal Education, who is coming to us today to present the findings from a tremendous global research engagement that she has been undertaking. And her report is called A New Direction for Students in an AI World. Just to kind of frame our conversation, I want to remind us all that generative AI is on pace to be as widespread as the internet. We know that it's going to be taking on more and more tasks on its own without humans driving it. We know that schools and districts all over the country are already using AI tools to create efficiencies, whether that be through adaptive learning platforms or AI tutors or offloading of tasks. And we know that many are contending with the ethics of this moment, whether that be privacy issues, whether that be bias in the data. My own daughter continues to remind me about the environmental impacts. So tremendous amount of questions that we are all holding in this society as we wrestle with the implications of artificial intelligence. So as we dive into this conversation, I want to anchor us around three reflections, tensions, if you will, that really stood out to me as I considered the research from these two individuals. The first is about innovation versus protection. I think many of us are so excited about the potential to innovate and bring greater personalization into the education system. But what happens when we can't protect our learners from some of the bias or inappropriate images or content that might appear in some of the information coming through these AI tools? The second is around this tension of a vision for systems transformation, the optimism of everything we think might happen, the way this tool might help radically change our education systems, with this reality that we'll hear from Rebecca, like implementation is lagging right now. Our educators and our leaders are really struggling to get access to the training they need to be able to use AI in a meaningful and deeper learning way. And the last is this notion of efficiencies versus human development. A student can certainly plug into an AI tool a prompt to ask to write an essay for them on a particular project they've been assigned. But what happens when they are not engaging in the productive struggle and the critical thinking that is needed to become learners and contributors to society? These are the tensions that I want us to hold as we think about this conversation today. Now, what Catherine and Rebecca will both remind us is a good thing, and that's that the future is not predetermined. We can wrestle with implications and considerations today, but it has never been more important than now to consider those implications and to begin to co-create the future that we want for our children and youth as they begin to engage much more deeply with artificial intelligence. And so with that, I'm going to ask Catherine to start us off. As our presenters engage, you'll notice a Q&A function at the bottom. Feel free to generate questions throughout this conversation. We are going to have time at the end to not only engage in discussion between the three of us, but also to take questions from the audience. So feel free to submit questions as our presenters share their insights. So Catherine, let's take it away.
Thanks, Lillian. So as KnowledgeWorks forecasts on the futures of K through 12 education in the US highlights, the next decade is going to be an especially uncertain one, and that's in the context that we can never know how the future is truly going to unfold. The next decade will also be an especially critical one. We're at a juncture when education leaders and change makers are going to need to act really deliberately to ensure that learning remains a strong public good and that our learning systems are resilient, relevant, and rooted in humanity. Over the next decade, we can expect to be integrating with AI ever more deeply in daily life as well as in educational settings. So we're likely to see AI systems increasingly working together to carry out activities, and more complex sets of relationships also form between people and AI. In addition, effective AI, which picks up on people's moods and emotions, is becoming more nuanced. And it could reach the point where it can really help adapt learning experiences to students' interests and experiences. And/or we could find that it manipulates them or even threatens secure human attachment. Longer term, automated general intelligence, or AGI, may develop, matching or surpassing human cognitive abilities. So still lots of unknown along that spectrum, but we do anticipate that next generation AI will change how people think and feel, thereby shifting what children and youth need in and expect from education environments. AI is also going to challenge our understanding of what skills we need to develop and how human relationships work, really causing reconsideration of educational outcomes, curricula, and approaches. We're going to need to be asking, what do we prioritize as AI continues to proliferate? So over the next decade, what it means to foster positive cultures, design effective learning environments, and assess mastery will shift as AI is increasingly a thought partner and a social emotional companion to students. But of course, AI doesn't sit in isolation. These additional drivers of change are intersecting with it to create the landscape of what's possible for the future of learning. With everyday disruptions, we're seeing a wide range of small to large scale disruptions likely to upend daily life in school and other learning environments. We'll probably find that over the next decade, conventional approaches to education management and change making just aren't sufficient to meet emerging needs. In the US, public institutions are also eroding. They're struggling with declining confidence, economic constraints, and market-based competition that's expanding. So in this context, public education systems are going to need to redefine the ways they serve learners and communities. And lastly, but certainly not least, the relevance gap is growing. Young people's realities are growing further and further removed from what's happening in schools. And that is really creating an urgent need for education systems to integrate students' needs, concerns, and aspirations into learning. So together, AI and these other drivers of change are making a powerful case for the need to redesign education systems for a changing world, not just tinker within the confines of our current systems. And I'll share some provocations suggesting what this could all add up to for education over the next decade. So we could see dynamic learning flows where we saw really extreme personalization of learning facilitated by AI, really oriented around meeting young people's needs in ways that could be hard to fathom today. As part of that, educators could be designing unique individual curricula and adaptive daily schedules that had feedback loops built in to allow for responsive breaks when students were getting overloaded or tired, that kind of thing. Or we could see modules and assessments automatically adjust to the needs of students with disabilities. More and more, AI bots could act as peer coaches, alongside students during group work, nudging them toward goals, analyzing progress, helping keep things on track. Or maybe in place of set bell schedules, AI could help learners build social capital by dynamically matching them with educators and places of learning so they could get together around common interests and learning goals, but in a much more fluid way than happens today. In another space of possibility, we could see a wide range of assessments proliferate, some of them powered by or leveraging AI that really helped us support diverse learning options and get new insights into learning. So for example, within this space, learners might demonstrate competency by teaching AI avatars. Or educators might use AI-powered analytic tools to gain insight into how a young person learned and showed mastery. Another alternative is that we could see such widespread cognitive atrophy that we would need to carry out regular testing for AI dependency and attachment disorders. Or maybe also, or instead, we might redefine mastery to include how a student had partnered with AI. Zooming out from these possibilities in the heart of learning environments, we also need to think about what educational structures might exist over the next decade or in 10 years. So we could see public education become increasingly modular, such that learners, along with their families and caregivers, were weaving together their own customized public education systems from among many public options. So in this kind of a future, AI could suggest customized sequences of a district's modules to ensure that each learner were progressing according to their needs without repetition. We might see education providers use AI to vet and onboard partners from other sectors to help expand the range of options available to young people, and then also use AI to recognize non-traditional learning. Excuse me. Another option is that some places might use locally trained AGIs to actually mentor and certify teacher candidates so that they're training them really specifically in that place's support approaches to teaching and learning. Another structural possibility is that at least in some places, we could end up with minimally viable public education, whereby resource constraints led more and more public schools to offer streamlined basic education. In this kind of a future, state education agencies might provide adaptive learning modules and AGI teachers to help fill curricular gaps and address human teacher shortages. Or maybe an educator corps managed elsewhere would send AGI educators to locations facing setbacks from climate or economic disruption. In this kind of a future, we might end up so focused on work-based preparation that corporations would end up locating skills-based training offices in schools. Another possibility is that more and more youth would just give up on school as we know it, become so disengaged that they decide to focus on self-teaching and peer-to-peer learning using the increasingly wide range of tools available to them. The last area to explore is how AI and other drivers of change might shift what's possible for education, governance, and administration. One possibility in this space is that some places might shift to really radical power sharing, where many groups and individuals were getting to participate, and also structures were in place to help align many learning providers and offerings. So in this kind of a scenario, school boards or other entities might leverage AI to make decision-making really transparent and inclusive. Or we might see state education agencies employ AI ethicists to make sure that schools were using the technology well and to certify them if they were. So these are just some of the zillions of possibilities on the horizon. But this is a really important time to make sure we're all taking informed steps to ensuring that we build a future in which education is a powerful and inclusive force for good. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. So, whew, our mind is blown. So many possibilities, and so many more probably that we could all generate if we had time to do so together. But what about now? So, Rebecca, this is a great moment for you to really anchor us in the reality of what you are learning as you engage globally, to really understand, like, what are people wrestling with? What is happening that's positive and maybe not so positive when it comes to AI use?
Thank you, Lillian, and thank you, Catherine. Can you guys see my slides just fine? All right. So absolutely. And a lot of the research we have been doing at Brookings really actually found exactly today what Catherine is talking about, sort of two possible directions of, quite optimistic and quite pessimistic. And to center everybody on what we did at Brookings is we looked at students. And these are my own kiddos. Lillian, you talked about your daughter. I just want to remind everybody that one of the main things that families and caregivers are thinking about every day in your education systems and with the students you serve is how do I protect and prepare my kids for an AI world at the same time? And that is one of the central questions that we undertook to look at in our Brookings Global Task Force in AI and Education that brought together a fantastic steering group. Some of the representatives organizations that were on the steering group I saw in the chat, like Digital Promise. And we did a lot of things to gather data over the past year. The report came out in January. And we talked to over 500 students, teachers, caregivers, technologists, education leaders across 50 countries, looked at over 400 studies, ran a Delphi panel, which the wonderful people at KnowledgeWorks would know because they do forecasting. For those of you who don't know, it's really a great methodology when the future's uncertain and you have to forecast. And so from all of that, we were trying to figure out, are we headed in the right direction when it comes to generative AI and students? And we conducted what we called a pre-mortem rather than waiting for a post-mortem, 5 years from now until when all the randomized controlled trials come out. And we did that because we really don't want to repeat the same mistakes at social media. When it rolled out, really without the insights of parents, educators, child development specialists at the table. 10 years ago, when social media was really sort of spreading into our kids' hands, we knew at the time that things like social comparisons in adolescence could be quite toxic if done poorly. So we know a lot about how kids learn, how they develop, the multiple ways in which schools support kids' learning and human development. And we want to make sure that AI is headed in the right direction. So our real question was, what are the risks? What are the benefits? How do we mitigate the risks and harness the benefits? And I will first now talk about what we found just in terms of our findings. And we have five big takeaways. I'm going to talk about our four uh, big sort of findings and leave the recommendations, which is our last takeaway, until later in our discussion. And our major takeaways are going to be a little bit here like the Cliff Notes version of this report, which is about 200 and something pages. So, takeaway number one, it's super confusing. If you're looking at students' learning and development, which was our focus, and generative AI, it is really hard to tell what is up, what is down, what's going on. There's many different types of tools. There's uh, you know, specialist tools and domains, teacher productivity tools, student-facing tools, etc. There's AI companions. We found that mostly students and often educators were using general purpose AI chatbots from the AI frontier labs, ChatGPT, Gemini, these types of things. And we also found that kids, particularly in the United States, I saw there's one person here at least who appears to be from the Middle East. So I'm talking about the US now because I think that's the preponderance of our audience. that in the US, which is not every kid, but when kids have access to devices and broadband, it is very easy to access AI, and it's a blurred line. The clarity between technology for learning and education, technology for communication, technology for entertainment has broken down. Kids are accessing AI all over the place. One high school student in the US told us, well, my school banned ChatGPT, but it's no big deal. We go on social media and we go through our AI friends and companions, and yeah, we talk to them, but we also take pictures of our homework and ask it to do our homework for us. And then we take it and run it through an AI humanizer. It changes it a bit and adds some typos, and then our teachers don't catch us. So that's confusing. We also know that these large language models from the big tech companies are heavily used by students. This is 2025 data for ChatGPT, and you see a massive drop in the summer months when schools are out of session. And this is partly why AI, generative AI, chatbots in particular, tools are heavily targeting students because it is where a large amount of use is. So we also, found that there's lots of good things, lots of bad things. Here the bad is in the in the orange, the good is in the blue. And so it was hard to sort of at first blush make sense of things. But ultimately, once we sort of shook out the data and really tried to sort of weigh things, we found that yes, generative AI can help kids learn if used very strategically in a narrow way. This is often integrated into very good pedagogy, mediated by teachers who have a strategic purpose to use it, paired with vetted content that is correct, not just sort of scooping off everything from the internet that's full of all sorts of strange theories. And some of the ways we found that Gen AI can help is bringing learning to life. There is real possibility, especially if cost goes down, and Catherine mentioned this, to having incredible experiential learning. Imagine learning about chemistry when you could actually interactively manipulate a molecule with virtual reality. You can also really help neurodivergent kids. One of the most sort of moving cases I found where generative AI was being used to help kids with aphasia who have communication problems, and all of a sudden they were able to make a synthetic copy of their voice, and in the classroom they can communicate with their teachers and their peers for the first time, which is really game changing. It can help teachers see where kids are stuck by providing much more granular data on the learning journey, which only helps instruction and learning. It can also really help adapt learning to kids' needs. One of the most moving examples I found comes not from the United States, but comes from Afghanistan, where if people don't know, the Taliban is in charge now, sadly, tragically, and they have banned, again, for a second time, girls in secondary school from attending school. And there's a lot of Afghan diaspora teachers who have fled the country, and a lot of girls who are sitting home, not in school. And these Afghan diaspora teachers, through an organization called Sola X, started creating little mini adaptive WhatsApp lessons of the Afghan secondary school curriculum. So teachers are leading this using Gen AI, and these little lessons go to girls' phones via WhatsApp, and then they disappear once they master the little module, and a new one shows up, helping scaffold their learning. Incredible in terms of adaptive learning, but also access to learning for kids who really don't have it. And we're going to see later that this idea of equity cuts both ways in terms of benefits and risks. So those are just some of the benefits we found. We also found that if used inappropriately, it can really hurt learning. And mainly when we say inappropriately, this is what we're calling wide AI use. It is more often when students are directly engaging in long form discussions without adult scaffolds, with commercial frontier model AI chatbots or AI friends and companions that are really not designed for kids at all. They're general purpose. They're designed for the whole society, and they're not designed for learning. They're designed to tell, not teach. One major thing that Catherine also referenced a bit is this idea of cognitive offloading. I have decided that I don't want to call it cognitive offloading anymore. I want to call it cognitive stunting because I have cognitively offloaded a lot of my sort of arithmetic to a calculator. And I learned it in school and then I offloaded it and I'm fine. And that's what you hear people saying. They say, well, why are educators freaking out? It's like the calculator. Not true. It is not like the calculator at all. The calculator sort of helped kids offload arithmetic. By the way, teachers always taught them arithmetic first, and but not everything in math, nor everything in English, nor everything in physics, chemistry, biology, history, social studies, write poetry, make music, art history, take the SAT for you, give relationship advice, and act really sad if you don't use it, which is all things that generative AI chatbots can do. So we're really worried about young people not having the cognitive learning experiences they need to actually grow their brains and become independent and critical and creative thinkers. And that's why I talk about stunting. And in, child development, you need basic nutrition to physically grow. I think we should all talk about cognitive stunting moving forward because that's what's happening. We know from lots of research, this is hundreds of thousands of essays collected over the last, let's see, 8 years. So before ChatGPT came out, these are seniors in high school writing their personal statements for college. And incredible academics at Georgetown University has been tracking and measuring creativity. And we know that every little dot here in this graph represents an idea. And the more widespread the dots are from each other, it means the ideas are much more are more different from each other. There's a lot of different ideas. Before ChatGPT, kids writing their essays had lots and lots of different ideas because the dots are farther away from each other. Now, after ChatGPT came out, the essays all sort of cluster around the same sets of narratives and ideas. So we're really worried. I'm really worried about the reduction in creativity skills and ability to create novel, innovative ideas from just maybe not even overuse of AI, but just straight up use of AI. We also are really worried about undermining social development for young people through largely engaging with, again, sycophantic AI friends, as well as sycophantic AI chatbots. Sycophantic meaning they're going to agree with you all the time. So 1 in 3 teens say they prefer talking to an AI friend equally or more than a human. And that's early days in this technology. And that's because they always agree with them and because they don't feel judged. So this has real implications for how kids develop socially and emotionally. How are you going to work in a group project or collaborate with peers or take feedback from a teacher about something you did wrong if you are developing the emotional and social muscle to be agreed with all the time? AI amplifies bias. One study by colleagues showed that if kids stick the exact same essay in ChatGPT and just say, hey, I like to listen to rap music. I think it was seventh grade. I can't quite remember. I'm a seventh grader. Give me feedback on this essay to improve it. And then they stick the exact same essay and say they like to listen to a different type of music, so rap versus classical music. The feedback that comes back from ChatGPT is, guess what? Really different. The kid who listens to classical music has feedback that's a full grade level higher, more complicated, pushing them to do better. So again, we know why that is because AI just reflects what is out there on the internet and digitized, which is a fair amount of bias. We also know that it is beginning to erode trust. I am very worried, maybe this is one of the things I'm most worried about eroding relationships and interaction between actors in the instructional core. And we know that the instructional core is the engine room of education and transforming systems. So the interaction between content, educators, learners, and of course, parents and families are in that loop. And it's not just teachers saying that they don't really trust what kids are producing. Half of middle school and high school teachers say they don't really trust the authenticity of their students' work. But students too are beginning not to trust that their teachers care or are actually grading their papers, etc. We also heard that parents are doing kind of weird stuff. They're taking assignments that kids get graded, rerunning them through AI, regrading them, and bringing them to teachers to challenge them. So it's very hard to have positive teaching and learning when you don't have a trusting relationship. You don't really mistrust until it's gone. The other piece, and this is when I said AI cuts both ways, is there is a possibility that in the medium term, AI will increase inequality. I'm going to talk about language here, but there's many dimensions. So on the light blue is the percentage of the total global population that speak these languages. English and Mandarin and Hindi is, top three. And then the dark blue is the percentage of websites that are in these languages. It is predominantly English and European languages. If you are in Nigeria or you're an immigrant from Nigeria and you speak Hausa, which there's 94 million Hausa speakers in the world, but and you put a query currently into a frontier model, you will not get much back. In English, you'll get pages and pages. Now, I think people are going to start working on this. This is one dimension, though, by which sort of in the medium term, AI may really increase inequality. I think in the short term, actually, late adopter communities may have a leg up on the early adopter communities because they can see the sort of mistakes and risks that are coming and adjust for them, hopefully, ideally. Ultimately, probably the thing that I'm most worried about is, and Catherine really hit the nail on the head when she talked about this, is really undermining students' motivation and engagement in school. We know engagement is what they do with their motivation, and that it is crucial and massively drives. If you care about chronic absenteeism, you got to care about student engagement. If you care about you're getting your NAEP scores up, you got to care about student engagement. If you care about the adolescent mental health crisis, you got to care about student engagement. The more kids are, the more those problems are improved upon. And I'm pretty passionate about this because I've done a lot of work with my co-author, Jenny Anderson. In last year, we published a book called The Disengaged Teen, Helping Kids Learn Better, Feel Better, and Live Better. And we did a deep dive on student engagement and really found that kids aren't just either engaged or disengaged. They're in four different modes, and they can move between them. But in resistor mode, they're avoiding and disrupting. Passenger mode, they're coasting, they're physically present, doing the bare minimum. Achiever mode, they're trying to be perfect and get a great, they're focused on the outcome, the grade, not the learning process. A lot of cheating in achiever mode and a lot of AI use. And explore mode, which is they're really excited about the learning journey. They're much more focused on the process and pretty resilient. We need kids in explore mode for an age of AI. We found that fully 50% of kids in middle school and high school were reporting that they were regularly in passenger mode. What I worry about is AI shifting that and creating a ton of kids in passenger mode and really demotivating kids. Again, we only found that 4% of kids said they were regularly in explore mode in high school. And so that to me, this is one of the most worrisome things because I've seen the kids that are highly motivated, engaged, and they take these AI tools and they do amazing things and off they go. But so many kids who are not, it's sort of exacerbating this relevance problem Catherine talked about. Um, Ultimately, we found that currently the risks overshadow the benefits. This is a list of our top 6 potential benefits, top 6 risks. If you just scan down them, you see the benefits are things like saving teachers time and adaptive learning and accessibility for neurodivergent kids and new forms of assessment. But the risks are things like undermining cognitive, social, emotional development, trust, dependence, lack of motivation. And the reason we say the risks overshadow the benefits is because the risks are really different. They're of a different nature. They're undermining young people's ability to think independently, engage effectively with other people, which they need to even access the benefits of generative AI. So, with that, those are our mega findings. And with that, Lillian, I'm going to hand back to you.
Yeah, so I asked Rebecca if we could kind of break her presentation up for a minute because I think it's important to stop and reflect on this moment. As both Catherine and Rebecca articulated, there are two big divergent paths here, right? We could have this really vibrant, exciting, personalized learning ecosystem where children and youth are flourishing, or we could see these risks that Rebecca are articulating take hold. We could have a whole generation of kids in passenger mode, moving forward, to use the framework from The Disengaged Teen, which I highly recommend that anyone read. It's a fabulous book. Um, as you guys looked at your research, I just really want to ask one question here before we kind of jump into where do we go from here. But how did it change your perspective on the purpose of school? I think it's important that we reflect big picture first before we get into some tangible pieces. So curious, what changed for you as you dug into this? And Catherine, do you want to go first since Rebecca was just on? We'll give her a second.
Sure, happy to. I think this exploration underscored my interest in human development as being the main purpose of education, a really broad and holistic view of what it means to develop as a person. So that we have that solid human core as we're navigating all this change. And I get worried when we focus more and more on workforce preparation as a purpose of education. Although I get that it's part of it because of it can get very technical and kind of lose track of that big picture, and also what it means to be ready for work is just changing so rapidly, and that's going to keep happening.
Yeah, I love that. Rebecca, what would you share?
I think Catherine is totally spot on. I 100% have been thinking the same thing. Like at the moment, there's a relevance gap because kids don't see the connection of what they learn in school to the outside world, but also sort of education and sort of the spine of how we have structured it unintentionally. We don't mean to do this. It's more from a bygone era, has become very transactional. Like, I just need to do these things, completion grades, assessment, actual knowledge mastery grades, and then I will get something. I'll go to the next grade, I'll get an A, I'll get a good transcript, and that will get me something. It's like cashing in, to buy something. And AI sort of takes the entire transaction and flips it on its head because kids are like, well, why am I doing this if a technology can do it better than me? And it's like, well, that's not what the purpose is. You're not
Mhm.
actually here just to collect points and then, get rewards along the way. The point is the process. And the point is the experience. And the only thing I would add to Catherine is the point is to develop yourself as a person, and that's the human development piece. But the other point that I think if we go 10 years out, we're going to have to really lean into, or will be um, especially obvious that its core. The other point is to learn to live together. Sort of this is really the only space in the United States, not the main space in virtually every community across our country where kids get a chance to learn to live and meet and rub shoulders with people who are different from their family or their neighbors.
Mhm.
And sort of that citizenship, civic, community building, social fabric, connective purpose of school, I think is going to be increasingly important. And we really can't, we will always have to have that, no matter if AI becomes another species and is in there with us, we still will need that.
Mm.
Yeah. I love that. One of the kind of key questions that bubbled up for me in this work was, you know, are we really innovating for optimization or for human development? And both of you really underscore, as we think about the purpose of schooling, it is this focus on human development. And that doesn't mean that there aren't other aspects of schooling that are also important too, but we can't lose sight of that. And I think about, that image, Rebecca, you just painted for me of our children and youth who are already feeling pretty dissatisfied with school to start with. I mean, we see that. You mentioned the chronic absenteeism numbers, the relevancy gap, Catherine, that you spoke about. Like our children are already pretty tired with the way we approach schooling right now. And to think that now they're seeing these tools come in that can just do it all for them, why wouldn't they just give in to that, right? And that's a real call to action, I think, for this moment. So, given that, let's pivot back into the next step of your research. Give us some recommendations. What are some of the things we need to be thinking about? And then we'll use that to kind of jump into some Q&A between us and the audience to consider some of those implications.
So, you know, ultimately, it's really not too late to shift course. We are early days. We talk about sort of all of us having a role. Every last one of us literally has a role to help bend the arc towards AI diminished learning, which is sort of this vision that Catherine painted early on, and that I went into around AI, taking us down a path that really diminishes learning and development towards AI enriching learning and development. There are three big steps that we talk about needing to do to make this happen. And we gave them three words for memorableness: prosper, prepare, and protect. And the first big pillar is we have to shift how we design education experiences. And we'll talk about that. The second is we need to prepare the people in our systems and our systems to really understand the online world and to navigate this, particularly with holistic AI literacy. And we need to implement safeguards. So we have a lot of, we have a lot of ideas and very specific recommendations under each of these. I will not bore you to tears and go through each one, but I'm going to highlight a couple. So first, under Prosper, we really think that doing a good pedagogy audit, an AI pedagogy audit, would be helpful to really figure out, I think we need three things: pedagogy that is AI aware, AI assisted, and AI resistant. AI aware being, if this homework assignment could easily be hacked by AI, don't assign it. Do something else. That's a heavy lift for educators. It's going to be a process, but it's really needed. AI assisted, where can AI really help? There is very specific ways that it could really amplify learning. And then AI resistant. We just talked, Catherine and I, about centering human development as a purpose of school, centering connection, in-person social community building and connection. So, what are the moments in the school day where we don't want AI and possibly any technology to intermediate our kids' experiences? Another recommendation we have is to create hubs, co-creation hubs, and put teachers as well as students and researchers, they can all be in there, and technologists, but really teachers in the driver's seat, where technologists and developers are supporting them to develop and chart the future of AI in education. We see this happening in the Netherlands at a national level with teacher unions and technology companies funded by the government and researchers. We see this a bit happening here. With teacher unions, AFT and UFT have started a new academy, AI Academy, and with support from tech companies. And they're not just training teachers on how to use AI, it's what it is, how does it work, but what would they want to develop with it. And then another thing I can't resist saying, we absolutely, absolutely need some high quality research in this area. We have to track how students are doing in terms of learning and development and well-being in an AI world. It's an area that we're beginning to scope a phase 2 research agenda on, and I'd be happy to engage with others there. In terms of prepare, holistic AI literacy, and what I mean by that is not here's a tool, here's how to learn how to navigate the tool. That to me is not sufficient at all. It would be like teaching biology to a student by showing them microscopes and petri dishes, showing them how they work, and be like, good, we're out, we're done. What we really needed is time that students, but also teachers and school leaders and civil society members and families learn this too. How does the online world work? What are the principles of basic computer science? That is not an AI, in your AI friend and companion, that's not a person in your phone. Underneath is zeros and ones. And we know when people have this awareness, they actually use AI less, it's less seductive. Uh, Student AI councils. We had a high school student co-author this report with us, and we consulted lots of students, and they are worried. They care. They do not care. The number one thing they're worried about is their own cognitive stunting and becoming dumber. And they said, bring us in. So I think every school or every district should have an AI council, which can do all sorts of things. They can co-create AI literacy work with peers. They could even vet teachers' assignments and make sure they're not hacked for AI-aware pedagogy on the previous recommendation. And then make sure you bring families in. One thing we know is that families are left out of this conversation and are desperate to know what to do. Last slide in terms of recommendations. Protect, I'm getting really sick and tired of this term. We need to teach students and people how to use AI responsibly. It's like, well, actually, you need to make responsible products that like that I don't have to like teach my child who I'm teaching to drive how to like make a responsible car. Like they have seatbelts and they have airbags. So we really need governments to put in safeguards, and better that it is regulation in terms of safety by design, which is that the products are designed to be safe, not that it's compliance oriented, like you get out there and try to use the justice system to tackle unsafe things. But we don't really have to wait for legislation. That's a fraught topic in the US at the moment, certainly nationally. School districts and states can really band together and use their purchasing power. We have in the report a whole list of criteria that would be good. And there's lots, and we surface lots of other folks like Digital Promise and ISTE and others who have a list of criteria for products that are safe and kid friendly. Ultimately, though, I think my main recommendation is whatever we can do to help kids get into explore mode, that motivated, engaged, excited for the learning journey and the learning process. And the more we can shift educational experiences to be about process and assess process, and fostering curiosity and linking to interests, the better off we are going to be. We have a few resources that are available to all of you. The report is on the website, as is the one-pager, six-pager, the podcasts. We also are creating short tip sheets for families that civil society member schools can use that distills the messages of the report for families, mainly because we heard when we did the research, families were like, can I read your report? And we were like, of course, it's like 250 pages of policy stuff. And they said, well, can you make a digestible version for me? They're really desperate. Of course, the book, and then I'm digesting all of this through a regular LinkedIn newsletter. So I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was incredible. Really good, tangible recommendations. So definitely encourage everyone to check out that report. And thank you for continuing to produce, tip sheets, and all of the resources that Brookings is putting out around this work are very accessible. So I appreciate that. You can get them in long form or you can get them in short form. So really encourage everyone to take the time. I want to just pivot into some questions. I'm reflecting on kind of your big like most important takeaway, right, of getting all students into explore mode, right? Like to me, I think that is where our work aligns so beautifully. The work that KnowledgeWorks does in supporting, more personalized and competency-based education systems, they are an approach to teaching and learning that is meant to get kids into explorer mode. Like we have to shift the way we're doing schooling in order to support more learner-centered approaches. And I think as I reflect on kind of this moment of opportunity, if you will, and the lens of the future that we want to design, I'm actually encouraged because I am seeing, half of the states in the country now have enacted policies to create these sort of state level portraits of a graduate and begin to talk about how to shift their systems, right, around these essential skills in addition to the academics that we know students need to be successful, right, in this world with AI. Those same states are also starting to kind of interrogate the one size fits all policy structures that implied like every school, every student has to go to school, sitting in the same seat, the same number of hours, the same course sequence to get to more like vibrant and engaging learning pathways that are going to really meet students where they are. And in fact, we've seen 45 states in the country have now changed their graduation requirements to say, like, we want students to be able to demonstrate mastery and show a competency-based demonstration, right, to graduate. And even 10 of those states have gone and said, we're going to align those to our portraits of a graduate. Now we're starting to see states even tackle the really hard areas of like assessment and accountability systems, right? Of like, how do we shift measurement? If we say these things matter, how do we start to measure and assess? So this feels like there's a lot of opportunity in the system moving forward. The question that I have for you both is as we start to navigate forward on this path, what are some of the benchmarks for success that we might want to look for? Like, how do we know that we're on the right path as it relates to the preferred one, right? The one where children are getting in explorer mode, the one where they're flourishing. What are some of the things that we would look for?
I'd be curious to really be understanding learner agency, their levels of engagement, and not like, am I engaged in a platform, but like truly engaged in learning, and understanding well-being for both students and educators. And I think there's an obverse for pretty much everything I said. Also, are educators engaged, or do educators feel that they have agency in systems? Are they well?
Yeah, I think those are great. We're beginning to sort of shape a phase to sort of here's these big recommendations from the task force report. Let's dive in on a piece of them, which is largely trying to flesh out the prosper pillar of, and I have appreciated so much over the years, KnowledgeWorks work on system transformation, which is basically what you were describing, Lillian. And the things that are rising to the top for us and me and my colleagues when thinking about this in relation to your question are, well, of course, learning outcomes. We more than ever need to make sure kids master content, because how else are they going to be able to assess AI production of information? And I've spent my career saying we need to move beyond, yes, content, but beyond. And now I'm worried we may throw the baby out with the bathwater and not have kids learn to read and do basic math and like basic scientific process. Learning outcomes. And alongside that, equally important, I would say student agentic engagement, which is kind of the construct behind explore mode, which is, do they have agency pointed towards their learning? A lot of kids do have agency in it, and they have left school, So that piece. And then the third for me would really be around relational trust, levels of relational trust amongst students and teachers and possibly families in this teaching and learning instructional core.
I love that. That's great. And I'm seeing some good chats coming in too from our participants of some of the things they would be looking for success. So feel free to kind of add to that if there are things on your mind as well. One question that came in from one of our audience members was really about this kind of accountability question, and this came in, Rebecca, in particular, when you were sort of reflecting on, all of the problems and mishaps, right, that can happen. And, Catherine, I know you also spoke to like this possible, 10 years out, we get to see this very fluid, fragmented education system. So who holds the actors in this system accountable, whether it be the technology companies that are not using learning sciences, right, to develop these AI tools? Like, who holds accountable for the future success in this system?
Mm. Catherine, you have forecasted a lot here and you talked a lot about governance and have looked at this. So I'd be curious what you say.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of possibilities depending on what learning structures and pedagogies are used in different settings. So I don't think it's necessarily a blanket answer. I think one promising line of inquiry is to think about how we might employ new kinds of strategic partnerships and new governance models for like people who have shared interests or maybe shared visions, or at least complementary visions, to kind of move forward together and kind of hold themselves and one another accountable. So that assumes a basic kind of good actor status. It's not like the entire picture, but I do think as we face an education landscape that is likely to be increasingly fragmented, thinking a lot about interconnection, networking, partnership, and with real, tangible, shared endeavors and aims is a promising strategy.
One of the things I've been thinking a lot about is public, basically parents, families, caregivers. And they are ultimately the arbiters of accountability. They elect our government officials. And I actually think we're probably not going to get anywhere good or in a place of good accountability unless they're brought into this dialogue. That was actually the purpose of the book, was to speak to teachers and parents to get them on the same page, give them some shared language around, instead of agentic engagement, which is very wonky and educators can get behind it. Parents are like, what are you talking about? Like, give them some language to sort of band together and try to, manifest the future we want together. Because actually, I think parents want what educators want. It's just we're kind of stuck in this miscommunication of, well, I need my kid to get all A's, and it's like, well, I guess I need to just focus on the test, and and nobody is happy, really. So I do think we should lean into that. And ultimately, in terms of holding technology companies accountable, there'll be more and less ethical companies, and there are out there, as there are in every sector. But other sectors have product safety. You can't really put a car on the road or toys on the road or drugs into to your pharmacy without actual product safety tests. And that's probably where we need to get. And frankly, um, assuming companies will just do it on their own is just silly. That's not how they're designed. They're not bad for profit maximizing. That's their purpose. That's their design. But of course, safeguards and government accountability needs to be a piece of that. Smart government accountability, of course. That's the tricky piece.
I love that. We certainly have our work cut out for us. There's a tremendous amount to do, and we're unfortunately at time, and just sort of reflecting on some of these other kind of questions that were coming in. There were so many participants who are holding in their hearts and minds the thoughts of whether it be those who are just graduating and they're feeling underemployed in the workforce, or students in alternative education, and how is that going to impact? And there's just so many facets of this that we're going to need to unpack. So I want to thank you both, and underscore that this is just the beginning of these conversations. We have much work to do. This webinar has been recorded and will be emailed out to anyone who registered, so feel free to share broad and wide. Make sure to check out the KnowledgeWorks forecast that Catherine and her team have put out. They continue to produce that every 3 years and deep dive publications in the off years. And certainly Rebecca, as she shared, so many great resources that are coming out. So make sure to continue to follow both of these fabulous thinkers. And make sure to stay in touch. We have another webinar coming up on April 7th that was put in the chat on future educator roles, and a great opportunity to kind of continue and explore the implications for what's shifting in our education system. So with that, I want to thank both of you very much and hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day.